The day a biker rolled into Fort Knox and everyone froze when they saw his tattoo. The rumble of 12 Harley-Davidson motorcycles echoed off the concrete barriers at Fort Knox's main gate as security guards reached for their weapons. Leading the pack was a massive man with silver hair and leather chaps, his scarred hands gripping the handlebars like he'd been born to ride. Nobody noticed the faded tattoo hidden beneath his sleeve, the same tattoo that would bring the entire base to a standstill in less than an hour. Welcome back to our channel, where we uncover the most incredible true stories that will leave you speechless. If you're ready for a story that will completely blow your mind, smash that subscribe button. Right now we drop jaw-dropping content like this every single week. Before we dive into what happened when these bikers rolled up to America's most secure gold vault, I need to know who's with me. Drop in the comments right now. How old are you, and what state are you watching from? Your engagement helps us reach more people with stories that need to be told. Marcus "Thunder" Rodriguez, 68 years old, sat astride his chrome-plated Harley, wearing colors that read Freedom Riders Charity Run. The Arizona desert had been brutal, but their mission was sacred, delivering care packages to disabled veterans at military bases across the Southwest. What the young MP at the gate didn't know was that Marcus hadn't set foot on a military installation in 31 years, not since the night he'd walked away from everything he'd ever known. "Purpose of your visit?" Corporal Jenkins asked through the bulletproof glass, his hand resting nervously on his sidearm as he eyed the intimidating group of leather-clad bikers. "Freedom Riders Charity Run, son," Marcus replied, his voice carrying the rasp of a man who'd seen too much and said too little. "We've got medical supplies and care packages for your Wounded Warriors program. Should be on your list." Corporal Jenkins checked his computer, trying not to stare at the massive man whose presence seemed to command respect from the other bikers. There was something about Thunder's bearing, the way he sat perfectly straight, the precision of his movements, the cold assessment in his eyes as he scanned the security checkpoint. "I'll need to see identification for all riders and perform vehicle inspections," Jenkins said, following protocol to the letter. As Marcus reached for his wallet, his leather jacket sleeve rode up slightly, revealing the edge of what looked like a military tattoo. Jenkins caught a glimpse of crossed rifles and partial numbers before the sleeve fell back into place. "Interesting ink," Jenkins commented casually as he examined Marcus's driver's license. "You serve?" Marcus's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Long time ago, kid. Different life." But Jenkins had sharp eyes, trained to spot details that others missed. As Marcus handed over his registration, the sleeve shifted again, revealing more of the tattoo, and Jenkins' blood ran cold. Those weren't just any crossed rifles. Those were the crossed rifles of the 75th Ranger Regiment, surrounded by numbers and symbols that shouldn't exist on any living person's arm. "Sir, I need you to step off the motorcycle," Jenkins said, his voice suddenly official and tense. "Problem, Corporal?" Marcus asked, but he was already dismounting with fluid precision that spoke of decades-old muscle memory. "I need to verify something. Please roll up your left sleeve." The other bikers started to protest, but Marcus silenced them with a raised hand. Slowly, deliberately, he pushed back his leather sleeve, revealing a tattoo that made Jenkins's hands shake as he reached for his radio. Inked in faded blue and black was the insignia of Delta Force's most classified unit task force, Raven, surrounded by coordinates, dates, and a serial number that, according to all official records, belonged to a man who died in Afghanistan 31 years ago. "Holy shit," Jenkins whispered, then caught himself. "Sir, I need you to remain exactly where you are. Don't move, don't speak to anyone, don't even breathe wrong until my commander gets here. If you think you know where this story is going, trust me, you have no idea. Hit that like button, because what happens next will change everything you think you know about missing soldiers and classified operations." Marcus stood motionless beside his Harley, surrounded by confused bikers and increasingly nervous security personnel. The desert sun beat down mercilessly, but he'd endured worse heat in places that didn't exist on any map. Fort Knox buzzed with activity, as word of the mysterious tattoo spread through the chain of command like wildfire. Within 20 minutes, the parking area looked like a military parade ground. Humvees surrounded the bikers, armed MPs took positions, and officers began emerging from the administrative buildings, with expressions ranging from curiosity to outright alarm. Major Patricia Williams, the base's intelligence officer, approached with a tablet in her hands and disbelief written across her face. She'd spent the last 15 minutes cross-referencing military databases, classified files, and records that most people didn't even know existed. "Sir, state your full name for the record," she commanded, her voice tight with professional control. "Marcus Rodriguez. But I think you already know that's not the name you're looking for." Major Williams checked her tablet again, comparing the man before her to a photograph that was older than most of the soldiers on the base. "According to our records, Staff Sergeant Michael Reaper Thompson, serial number 123-45-6789, died in a classified operation in Afghanistan on November 15th, 1993. Marcus or Michael smiled grimly. "That's what the report says. Reality was a little more complicated." "Complicated how?" Major Williams demanded. "Complicated as in I was burned, my love. Left behind enemy lines after an operation that officially never happened. The brass decided it was easier to declare me Kia than explain why a Delta operator was running unsanctioned missions in a country we weren't supposed to be in." The major's tablet nearly slipped from her hands. "That's impossible. We don't abandon our people." "Tell that to the 3 men who died trying to extract me," Michael said, his voice carrying 3 decades of suppressed anger. "Tell that to the families who never got the real story about why their sons came home in boxes while I was left to rot in a Taliban prison for 18 months. Other bikers were getting restless, confused by the military jargon and increasing tension. But their confusion turned to shock as armed soldiers began forming a perimeter around them. "Marcus, what the hell is going on?" demanded Jake Morrison, a fellow biker whose own military service ended with an IED blast in Iraq. "Why are they treating us like terrorists?" "Because," came a voice from behind the crowd of soldiers, "they just discovered that their friend here is supposed to be dead." The crowd parted as Brigadier General Robert Hayes approached, his face pale with recognition and what looked suspiciously like guilt. He was older now, carrying the weight of command and 3 decades of secrets, but Michael recognized him immediately. Well, well," Michael said softly. "Little Bobby Hayes, last time I saw you, you were bleeding out in a foxhole outside Kandahar, while I stuffed your intestines back where they belong." General Hayes stopped dead in his tracks, staring at the man who'd saved his life and vanished into legend. "Jesus Christ Reaper, we thought," the report said. "The report said what you needed it to say," Michael replied coldly. "Can't have dead Delta operators walking around asking uncomfortable questions about who authorized what and why good men died for political convenience." The general looked around at the growing crowd of soldiers and bikers, all hanging on every word of this impossible conversation. "We need to take this somewhere private. Now." "No," Michael said firmly. "I've been private for 31 years. Today, we do this in the open." "What would you do if you discovered that the government had declared you dead and erased your existence? Would you come back demanding answers like Michael did? Or would you have stayed hidden? Tell me in the comments what you think about soldiers who get abandoned by their own system." The standoff lasted another hour as more officials arrived from the Pentagon, the CIA, and departments whose names were classified above Major Williams' security clearance. Michael stood calmly beside his motorcycle, answering questions with the patience of a man who'd had 31 years to prepare for this moment. "Why come back now?" asked a stern-faced colonel whose name tag read Davis, but whose credentials suggested much higher authority. "You could have stayed Marcus Rodriguez forever. Built a life, stayed safe, kept our secrets buried." Michael reached into his leather jacket, moving slowly to avoid triggering the 24 weapons trained on him. He pulled out a sealed envelope, yellowed with age and worn from decades of careful handling. "Because I made a promise to a dying man," he said simply. "Sergeant First Class Danny Martinez took 3 bullets trying to cover my extraction. Before he died, He asked me to deliver this letter to his wife. Took me 31 years to work up the courage to keep that promise. Colonel Davis examined the envelope, noting the military postal markings and the faded writing that read, Mrs. Elena Martinez, Phoenix, Arizona. Martinez has been dead for 31 years, Davis said carefully. His wife remarried. She's Elena Patterson now. Lives in Tucson with her grandchildren. I know, Michael replied. I've been watching over Danny's family from a distance for 3 decades. Made sure his kids got into good colleges, that Elena never wanted for anything, that his grandchildren knew their grandfather was a hero, all without them ever knowing I existed. The colonel's expression softened slightly. That's admirable, but it doesn't explain why you're here, at Fort Knox, instead of delivering the letter privately. Michael's smile was sad and tired. Because Danny's letter isn't the only thing I've been carrying around for 31 years. He reached into his other pocket and withdrew something that made every military officer present suck in their breath set of dog tags, tarnished with age but still perfectly legible. These belong to Captain James Fletcher, Michael announced loudly enough for everyone to hear. According to your records, Captain Fletcher died heroically defending a forward operating base. What your records don't say is that Fletcher was captured alive, tortured for information about American troop movements, and executed 3 days after I escaped that Taliban prison. The silence that followed was deafening. Even the desert wind seemed to hold its breath. Fletcher's family never knew he was captured, Michael continued relentlessly. They never knew he died protecting classified information that would have gotten hundreds of Americans killed. They never knew their father died as a hero, instead of just another casualty of war. General Hayes stepped forward, his face ashen. Reaper, you don't understand the bigger picture. Those operations were classified for national security reasons. Revealing the truth would have compromised ongoing missions, endangered other operatives. Endangered your careers, you mean? Michael shot back. It was easier to write us off as acceptable losses than admit that Delta Force was running unauthorized ops in cooperation with CIA black sites. The confrontation was escalating rapidly, with more vehicles arriving and news helicopters beginning to circle overhead. Someone had leaked the story, and now the entire situation was playing out under the scrutiny of national media. But the real shock came when a young soldier pushed through the crowd, his face flushed with excitement and recognition. "Sir!" Specialist Rodriguez called out, addressing Michael directly. "Sir, you probably don't remember me, but my grandfather was Sergeant Martinez, Danny Martinez. He talked about you." Michael's composure finally cracked. "You're Danny's grandson?" "Yes, sir. Grandma Elena used to tell us stories about the soldier who tried to save Grandpa. She said you were like a guardian angel watching over our family, even though nobody knew your name." The young soldier's words carried across the silent crowd like thunder. "Grandma Elena died last month, sir. She made me promise that if I ever met the man who tried to save Grandpa, I should tell him that our family never forgot. She said she always felt like someone was watching over us, making sure we were okay." Michael's eyes filled with tears for the first time in 3 decades. The letter he'd carried became suddenly heavier in his hands, weighted with a love that had transcended death and time. "She knew?" he whispered. "She always knew, sir. She said real heroes don't need recognition, they just need to know their sacrifice mattered." This is it, folks. This is the moment that changes everything. Subscribe to our channel right now because you need to see how this incredible story ends. We're about to witness something that will restore your faith in the bonds between soldiers and the families they protect. What happened next became military legend within hours and national news within days. General Hayes, faced with 31 years of buried truth and the unwavering gaze of a man who'd sacrificed everything for his country, made a decision that would define the rest of his career. "Clear the area," he ordered, but not to arrest Michael. "I want a full honor guard assembled in 30 minutes. We're going to do this right." Colonel Davis protested immediately. "General, the security implications are my responsibility." Hayes cut him off. "This man served with distinction and was abandoned by his own government. The least we can do is give him the recognition he earned 31 years ago." As soldiers scrambled to organize an impromptu ceremony, Michael found himself surrounded by his fellow bikers, who were beginning to understand the magnitude of what was happening. "Jesus, Marcus," Jake whispered. "You're actually him. You're the ghost operative Elena Patterson talks about at the veteran meetings, the one who saved her family." "How long have you known?" asked Sarah Chen, another freedom rider whose husband had died in Iraq. "I've been watching all of you," Michael admitted quietly. "Every member of the Freedom Riders is connected to someone I served with or someone I failed to save. This charity run isn't random, it's my way of honoring the men who didn't make it home." The honor guard that assembled was unlike anything Fort Knox had ever seen. Word had spread throughout the base about the mysterious biker who'd returned from the dead, and soldiers from every unit wanted to participate in what was being called the ceremony 31 years overdue. General Hayes personally supervised the arrangement, ensuring that both Danny Martinez's letter and Captain Fletcher's dog tags would be handled with the respect they deserved. "Staff Sergeant Thompson," the general began formally, "by the authority vested in me by the United States Army, and on behalf of a grateful nation, I hereby posthumously promote you to the rank of Sergeant First Class and award you the Distinguished Service Cross for extraordinary heroism in combat operations." The medal had been hastily retrieved from the base's ceremonial collection, but its weight was profound as Hayes pinned it to Michael's leather jacket. "Furthermore," the general continued, "the United States Army formally apologizes for the circumstances that led to your presumed death and the abandonment of recovery efforts. Your service and sacrifice are hereby officially recognized and entered into the permanent record." But the most powerful moment came when Specialist Rodriguez stepped forward with a folded American flag, the same flag that had covered his grandfather's coffin 31 years earlier. "Sir, Grandma Elena wanted me to give this to the guardian angel if I ever found him," the young soldier said, his voice breaking with emotion. "She said it belonged to both of you, Grandpa, for dying as a hero, and you for living as one." Michael accepted the flag with hands that shook for the first time since his capture. 31 years of guilt, anger, and isolation crashed over him like a dam bursting, releasing emotions he'd buried so deep he'd forgotten they existed. The ceremony concluded with something unprecedented in military history: a Harley-Davidson escort for a decorated war hero as he completed his final mission. 12 motorcycles formed up behind Michael as he rode slowly through Fort Knox toward the base memorial wall, where Danny Martinez's name was engraved alongside hundreds of other fallen heroes. At the wall, Michael carefully placed the letter against Danny's name and hung Fletcher's dog tags on the memorial hooks designed for such tributes. The simple acts took only moments, but they completed a journey that had lasted 3 decades. "Mission accomplished, brothers," he whispered to the names carved in stone. "I finally brought you home." The media firestorm that followed was immediate and intense. News outlets across the country picked up the story of the ghost soldier of Fort Knox, and within hours, Michael's face was on every major network. The Pentagon faced uncomfortable questions about classified operations, abandoned soldiers, and the families who'd lived for decades without knowing the full truth about their loved ones' deaths. But Michael refused all interview requests, declining to capitalize on the attention his revelation had generated. He had one more stop to make. 3 days later, Michael stood on the front porch of a modest house in Tucson, holding an envelope that had traveled farther than any letter in history. Elena Patterson, now 78 and surrounded by children and grandchildren, opened her door to find the man she'd spent 31 years hoping to meet. "You must be Marcus," she said simply, as if she'd been expecting him all along. "I'm Elena. Danny told me you'd come someday." The conversation that followed was private, witnessed only by the family members who'd grown up hearing stories about their grandfather's mysterious guardian angel. Michael delivered Danny's letter, shared memories of a young soldier's courage, and finally allowed himself to grieve for the men he'd been unable to save. Elena's response was everything he'd hoped for and more. She didn't blame him for surviving when Danny didn't. She didn't question the 31 years of silence. Instead, she thanked him for keeping his promise and invited him to stay for dinner with the family he'd protected from the shadows for 3 decades. Here's my final question for you. Do you think Michael was right to stay hidden for 31 years, protecting his brother's families without recognition? Or should he have come forward sooner to expose the truth about abandoned soldiers and classified operations? And what do you think about a government that would rather declare a soldier dead than admit their mistakes? Share your thoughts in the comments. As Michael prepared to leave Tucson the next morning, Elena handed him something that completed the circle of his long journey home: a photograph of Danny Martinez in his dress uniform, inscribed with a message that brought tears to his eyes. To the guardian angel who kept our family safe, welcome home, hero. Love, the Martinez family. Michael rode his Harley back into the desert, no longer a ghost haunting the edges of other people's lives. The Freedom Riders had a new mission, now helping other abandoned veterans reconnect with the families and country they'd served. The charity run had become something bigger, a movement to ensure that no soldier would ever again be erased from history for political convenience. But the most important victory was personal. For the first time in 31 years, Michael Thompson could sleep without dreams of the men he'd failed to save. He'd kept his promises, honored his fallen brothers, and finally found his way home to a country that was ready to acknowledge the full cost of its secrets. The ghost soldier of Fort Knox had completed his final mission, but his story would inspire a new generation of veterans to never give up on their brothers, no matter how long the journey home might take.